Clam Gardens, or what we say in our language, loxiwe, which means place of rolling rocks, are where our ancestors, our people, actually took larger rocks from higher up on the beach and they rolled them down to that lower intertidal zone. So they knew, they had an understanding that clams liked that nice low intertidal zone between 0.8 and 1.5 meters tide. And so they rolled it down, which essentially raised a rock wall, which would be filled in that was level with that ideal habitat for clams, which then could increase productivity and be more accessible land for them to harvest clams. Yoixis Nugwa Gavin. Hi, my name is Gavin Woodburn. I am a Kwiakah First Nation member, Gayuchin Lach Nasinuch, which is actually where we are. I am a research assistant student for the Indigenous Science Division at Environment and Climate Change Canada, and currently leading my own loxiwe clam garden project.
Nugwayam Manmathila. I'm the chief of Kwiakah First Nation. Been in my position for 35 plus years now. I inherited this position from my grandfather, who was a past previous hereditary chief of Kwiakah. I, seen a lot of changes over the years in regards to how management is done within our territories, how we relate to government. Happy to see this project proceed, and it creates a lot more opportunities, I think, for not only Kwiakah but other nations. We've done a lot of projects within our territories over the years, and this is just another step in identifying what is happening on our lands, where there's forestry, fisheries, and other environmental issues.
On these clam gardens, we've been working to understand them by doing quadrat studies and placing 5 quadrats along the beach and digging 30 centimeters deep to see how many clams are there. From there, we can get a rough understanding of how many clams might be on the beach. And likewise, we pair that with a GPS survey going around the perimeter of the beach, taking beach levels, heights, that match the tide, so we can then begin to understand how much clams or how much food is actually on these clam gardens, and likewise, how much food could there be on these clam gardens based on the size of them.
Essentially, and be sorting through all of the sediment that we dig out. So we can fill this little tray up with water that we can put the clams in that we find, and if we want to start digging, you could dig into the trays, and then somebody can sort through the sediment that's in the tray, the big tray. So yeah, you can just start.
I'm only worrying about clams.
No, we're just learning about clams. So you can either, we could probably loosen it up with the shovel, and then just get it in here, and just kind of, get a bit of the dirt in here, and then look through it, so that we're kind of making sure that we're carefully looking through and not missing a lot of those smaller clams. Yeah.
Oh, very good.
With my team at the Indigenous Science Division, I take on a larger research role where I am project manager, researcher lead, and so I'm really organizing this whole project on the clam gardens in my territory with my community, working on connecting links with NGOs, community, university, as well as organizing with the help and supervision of Dr. Mearl Ballard at the Indigenous Science Division.
I'm Mearl Ballard. I'm an Anishinaabe from Lakes and Martin First Nation. I'm also a prof at the University of Manitoba, Faculty of Science.
You got a butter? Yeah, I got a big butter.
to integrate the Indigenous science, the knowledge of the Indigenous peoples into the work that the government is doing. It's so critical. It was the Indigenous science that sustained the people a long time ago, and before the settlers came, it was their knowledge of the land, knowledge of the water, knowledge of the species, knowledge of the air, the birds, flora and fauna, and whatever is on the land and water. It's this knowledge that sustained Indigenous peoples way back then and to the present. And we want to use this knowledge for government and decision making.
Clam Garden used to go way out in beautiful clams. You could dig there. There's a lot of good spots there, all the way around the island. I don't know why, how come we're lucky to have clams all the way around, all the way to Harriet Bay, the backside. That's where I used to go.
We win, we got the big clam.
Yeah. Yeah, we do.
The last few days, we've had amazing representation from the community. Not only have we had multiple government agencies, from myself at Environment and Climate Change Canada, as well as a biologist from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, but we've also had representation from the Clam Guardians, a Clam archaeologist, Clam and Kwiakah community members, as well as technicians from LIGWTDAX Fisheries Society, which is actually owned by 5 of the First Nations in the area.
My name is Michael George Dick. I'm a Kwiakah band member. I work for LIGWTDAX Fisheries. There's probably at least a dozen, if not 2 dozen, small, medium, and large size clam beds here, and yeah, we've been looking at them. They moved a lot of rock in order to make those, and there had to be a lot of people doing a lot of hard work.
Hi, my name is Jordan LeBay. I'm a guardian watchman with the Campell River First Nations, which is also known as the Clam Nation. I think that with the clam beds that we have out here and a bit of a distance away from town, you could say, yeah, there's clam beds out there. But how do you know what they look like? How do you know what they feel like? How do you know how productive they are? How do you know how productive they were for our people? And I hear that from just stories like I heard the other day, where there were certain clam beds along the way that that would be used as a rest stop of sort, where they could eat food there. So they would purposely build clam beds in between travel routes, just so they could plan that out. And it's just so amazing that they could do that. Oh, we obviously live in a different time where we don't need those connections, but I think understanding them is really important to where we've come. And that if we wanted to do a clam bed, yeah, we could do it closer to home. If we can find a site that's closer to home, to our home base in Campbell River, it would be potentially easier to get members into that, allowing them to connect to their culture if they wish to.
They would actually go to the shell midden and sort of scoop up there. They can get the crushed shell and some of that really rich nutrients and spread it along the clam gardens. So then that way they're just giving them more nutrients, more ideal substrate that they want to be in. Part of understanding the clam gardens, why they were built, why they're working, we also wanted to make sure to add in some other research components through observation. Some of these included snorkeling over the clam garden at high tide when it's underwater, looking at the rock wall and looking at how those species come alive when it's under the water. Aside from this, we've also gone up to a previous village site that used to house thousands of people on top of a shell midden, looking at different shells and different fire-altered rocks within the shell midden to see what they ate, see how the clams have maybe changed since when they were eating them, see how many people might have been there. And likewise, we've gone onto the village site above and seen house depressions where people live. Start to get an understanding of how big were the houses, how many houses were in this area, and start to understand those dynamics of how people were living here and how they were using the clam gardens.
Butter, eh? Look at that baby. Definitely a big house, this one, eh? Like, it looks pretty long. There's a lot of people here.
I heard stories that people would go visit their family that lived up there in Philip's Arm. And getting close to the head of Philip's Arm, and they couldn't see the houses because there was so much smoke there. And somebody said, "Where did the smoke come from?" "The chimneys of the houses." And I guess the smoke like kind of fell down in amongst the houses, so they couldn't see the houses. So all those people lived there and at the head of Philip's Arm.
FAR, where it was. Wow. But, so shellmans are like garbage dumps, but they threw all their shells and everything, bone. But it was also, they used them for gardens, like ribosome gardens and stuff. And they also used it as foundation for the base of your house and stuff, because it would compact. So they tell us a lot. They tell us what we were eating. Yeah, they're pretty interesting because they give us a whole rundown. How deep and how wide they are tell you how big and how old the village is.
Oh my gosh, you can see the...
Stratigraphy. I just want to see what's down here. So I think this is ash here. These are all cooked clams.
That's compressed shell. You can see all the fragmented shells right in there.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Yeah, so this is a village site in Philip's Arm. Is there a name for it, Mike?
Matseno.
Matseno. And we're sitting on a shell midden here, which is really interesting because it goes pretty low down. The black dirt tells us that this is shell midden and that people were here. And after the shells start decomposing and getting smaller and smaller, they just end up being black, silty, slimy dirt. And so today we found horse clams, little necks, butters, and mussel, and some whelks in here, and a deer bone. So it kind of told us what they were eating and where they were at. There's lots of fire-cracked rock in it, which you find everywhere, that tells you that they were using it to have their fires. But yeah, it's proof we're here and that we ate clams. Clams have been here since the beginning, so that's why I don't believe we had starvation food, because the tide was out, the table was set.
After really only having 2 weeks of field work, having interviews with elders and knowledge keepers, being on the Clam Gardens and exploring the lands of our ancestors, it only makes me more excited for what else we can do in this project. We've only begun to understand what the Clam Gardens are doing right now, what their food looks like, how much food they could have. But in future studies, I think we can go even further into this. We see trash littered on the beach. We should be revitalizing that and seeing how we can bring the Clam Gardens back to life, how they once were. We can go in further to see those relationships between the Clam Gardens and the people by looking through those shell middens, understanding the culture that was deposited for thousands of years. And so going in and bringing community members out to the Clam Gardens, putting them back on their ancestral grounds, seeing how their knowledge comes back, and likewise seeing how the knowledge was always there with them, seeing how they interact with the land and with the Clam Gardens. That's the beauty of science and research, is to be able to bring it back to the community and let everyone learn and connect again.